Hey, welcome to reading people in 5 minutes using the Big Five. And the reason why the Big Five is so valuable is because it's the only model that's scientifically backed and that it can also help us predict future behavior. And this is the true value of it. So once you're able to read people using the Big Five, you'll be able to predict their behavior in the future and even predict some of their life outcomes. You'll also know the best way you can communicate with them. So in this video, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you and talk a little bit about the model, because it's very useful to understand what it's really good at and what areas it's not great at. Also, we're going to talk about how to actually do it, and that's reading people using the Big Five. And we're also going to talk about how to quickly identify the traits in people and how to run tests and to see that and to validate whether they're high in a certain trait like openness or extroversion, or if they're low in a certain trait. Let's begin. Now, if you haven't taken a personality test yet, there's a free link below. You can click on it. It takes only a few minutes. You can get an idea of your personality type. And this is going to help you tremendously for this video, because if you're really high in one of these traits, it's going to filter the way you see the world. And by virtue of being really high in a trait, it's going to make it somewhat more difficult to see people that are lower than you in that trait. You're also going to filter for people that have your trait as well. So in some way you're going to be better at identifying them, but at the same time the variance, or where they are on the sliding scale, is going to be a little off. So you really need to know where you are in terms of your personality traits. Now, if you find this information useful, make sure you subscribe, like the video. And if you have any questions, you can email me below or text message me or write in the comments. So without further ado, let's begin. For the last 50, 60 years, since the 1940s and 50s and 60s and so on, scientists have had an inventory of personality words. And one of them is referred to as the Neopi. There's a number of other ones. And in the 90s, using five-factor analysis, they realized that certain words go together. And that's how they came up with the Big Five. And they ended up being in five major categories. So for example, if someone was really happy, they also tended to smile more. So there was this really, really high relationship between happiness and smiling. And so scientists realized that in some way you're measuring a similar trait. People that are happier, they're also going to smile more. They're also going to be enthusiastic. They're going to be in better positive emotion. People that are assertive are going to be approaching their goals. They're going to be more bold. They're going to lead. They're going to be the first to act. So that's one of the categories. Extroversion. Another category is openness. That's the creativity and intellect. These are people that like to create. Think musicians, artists, poets. Entrepreneurs fall into this category. Philosophers fall into this category. Now, those guys are on the intellectual side. Movie stars, because again, they're in drama, they're in a creative field. And it's neuroticism. And neuroticism is the fear response. And it prevents people from moving forward, because sometimes the area that you're going to move forward to is inherently dangerous and it's not a good idea to move forward. Other times, you need to defend yourself. And so there's defensive aggression, that's volatility. And those traits went together. And then there's agreeableness, and that's like the idea that we should get along. And this is the personality trait that likes that acts as like a social glue and keeps the society kind of moving forward together. It's empathetic and compassionate. It's associated with the maternal instinct. And then there's conscientiousness, and that is being orderly, being industrious, being well organized, having a plan and moving towards your plan, and not giving up easily. So this is how the model was developed over time. It's, as you've noticed, a lexical model. It assumes that our words that we use to describe personality are the main words to use to describe personality, and that there are no other words that can be used to describe personality. And then these words fit into these five buckets as described. Then in the 2000s, they found out that there was a biological component to this, that it wasn't just a lexical model, but there was a biological evolutionary basis to it. And this deals with how we interact with the world, because the deterministic point of view, which was prevalent in science, and it's still somewhat prevalent in our culture, is that you see the world is made of objects, and you move and things are very simple and concrete. And if you see an apple, there's an apple there, and so on. Later we find out that that's not entirely true, that people filter the world, and there's an enormous amount of information all around you, and you decide what to look at. And based on your personality type, you get rewarded at looking at different things. So someone that's high in extroversion, they're going to have more of a story format in terms of how they see the world. They're going to be more goal-oriented. They're going to be the main character in their story, and every time they move towards a goal, they're going to get happier, and their brain is wired in such a way where they get a dopamine release. So it ends up being a positive feedback loop. A goal emerges that they notice in their environment, something that they want. They get energy through a dopamine rush. They move towards the goal. As they make progress, they receive more of a dopamine rush. Then they achieve the goal, again, another dopamine rush. And then the next time it repeats, it's going to create a positive spin cycle. So positive emotion is helping someone move towards a goal. People that are highly conscientious are using planning and organizing to organize all this information that's around them, put it into nice, simple boxes to understand, and which allows you to navigate more easily towards the goal. And then they're keeping track of going from point A to point B, and they're excellent at it. Creative people, they're going into the unknown in essence. They're trying to create new ways of solving problems because maybe the old ways are not as viable anymore. And by going into the new way of solving problems, the downside is that you might, go in the wrong direction to your old detriment. On the positive side is you might solve a problem that's very pressing. You might also solve a problem that has already been solved, but solve it 10 times better and tremendously change the quality of people's lives. Those are the main ways through which people filter the world. Agreeable people see the world from the point of view of compassion and the maternal instinct and caring for each other, which is very important in like a tribe setting, that you have someone that takes that role. And then people that are high in neuroticism, it filters the world so they're more aware of dangers. And evolutionary, that's very important because imagine you're walking through the jungle and you hear a sound in the bush. Is it better to imagine that it's a lion and run away? Or is it better to imagine it's a butterfly and stay there? If you're wrong, you're going to die if it's a lion. If you're wrong and it's a butterfly and you run away, there's no downside, right? You just had a little anxiety. So that's essentially the biological basis of the model. And it's hardwired into the brain to a large degree. So the thing with any of these traits, they're pretty biologically inherited, 0.4 to 0.6, roughly speaking. The other side of it is character adaptations, and that is the environment that you're brought up in, the world that you live in, and in your character, your personality, you adapt to your environment. And so whenever a situation arises, it's going to be one part your brain and the way it's hardwired, and another part is going to be the character adaptations you've brought to the table. And those character adaptations include your culture, your language, your beliefs, your attitudes, and your self-identity. That is who you think you are, or the story of yourself. So now let's look at how to read people based on this model. And you could probably already tell the area where the model is really focused on. It's really focused on the biological side. It's not that focused on the character adaptation side. And that's the area that we can improve later on. So first, how to read people using the 5-factor analysis. So when you first meet someone for the very first time, you need to know what to look for, and you need to look for certain markers. And the best way to think about reading people is as follows, is first, no one is just one trait, right? People are going to have a dominant trait, which is going to be the dominant way through which they filter the world, okay? The second part is they're going to have other traits that they're either high or low on. And that dynamic is going to play out, and it could be complementary, or it could not be so complementary. It can create a lot of internal conflicts. So that's one thing to notice. Another thing to know is that the way we know that someone has a certain trait and they're pretty high on it, the best is self-report. If they took the test and you saw their test results, and then you would know. But you observing them is the second best way, and then understanding why they're doing certain things is the key. Because you might see someone that is, for example, not at a party and they're not talking to anybody. Okay, they could be at a party not talking to anybody because they might be introverted and they have no interest in talking to anybody, or they could be high in neuroticism and they're feeling extremely shy, right? Now the behavior is them not talking to anybody, but unless you understand why they're not talking to people, then you won't know whether they're low in extroversion or high in neuroticism. And this is something really important to note. So, and the key here is that the best way to think about it is that when you're seeing these behaviors is to start to think about probabilities. And that is that someone is expressing a certain behavior, okay? Then your next thing is you want to discover what the feeling and the cognition is behind this behavior that's manifesting the behavior. And this gives you things to test. So once you see the behavior, it could be a number of things. So maybe when you strike a conversation with them, you start noticing their body language. Are they being like really reserved? Do they have low body language? Are they blushing? Are they uncomfortable? And then if you see those signs, you can ask them, and then you could see what they say. The next thing you want to find out is this a unique situation, or is this something that's consistent? Because anyone can do their homework for a night, right? Anyone can show up to a meeting on time. But what makes you conscientious in this example would be showing up to meetings on time every time, right? What would make you neurotic would be, in this case, being shy on a consistent basis. So are they typically behaving this way? So without further ado, these are the main things to look for. So extroversion, we'll start there. Now extroversion, the best way to think about extroversion is that it uses positive emotions to move people towards their goal. And extroverts naturally think in stories. And since they think in stories, if you could put yourself in the mind of an extrovert, they're going to be people focused. So they're going to solve most of their problems using people, using their relationships. And the way they see the world is that they're the main character of their story. They're the hero. And the goals that they want to accomplish is what's going to make them happy. Okay? And so they have a goal, and then they get a boost of positive emotion that helps move them towards the goal. Whenever it's not working out, they get negative emotion. And one of the really interesting things about extroverts is that once they get to and achieve their goal, it validates their story. So since it validates their story, they think the story is true. Okay? They have almost a Darwinian approach towards truth. It's true because it worked. Okay? It's effective, henceforth it's true. Now, extroverts have two major facets, and we're going to use the Jordan Peterson model for all these. Assertiveness and enthusiasm. So people that are high in assertiveness, you have to look for these behaviors. First, they're going to be the first to talk. They're going to be the first to act. They're going to be bold, and they're going to take the lead on things. Okay? They're going to speak and share their opinion even if you don't ask for it. So if you're hanging out with a group of people, maybe you just met a group of people for the first time, those are the things you look for. Is this person behaving this way? In terms of how they might look in appearance, I think extroverts like to look good. They want to dress to impress. They dress for success. So in terms of dressing, think of it this way. The way to interact with people, they're going to be enthusiastic. They're going to, and this is on the enthusiasm side. They might be gregarious. They might use a lot of gestures, a lot of facial expressions, a lot of open body language. They might be very animated. And animation is a form of dominance. They'll be comfortable and they'll like speaking with a group of people. Chances are they probably have a lot of friends. So in terms of actions, okay, you will notice that they're more likely to behave impulsively. Okay, if you're at a casino, there's a good chance that a good portion of the people that can't get off the poker table are extroverts. And that's because in their story, things are working out and they're discounting the future for the present because the present is so good, they assume the future will also be good. In a sense, they're eternal optimists. They're spontaneous. They're also thrill-seeking. One way you can test this is if you propose something really fun, okay, chances are an extrovert will jump on it. In terms of language, since they think in stories, since they're the main character of their story, they end up telling a lot more stories than the other traits, and especially people low in extroversion. And the stories they tell are going to be centered around the goals that they have. They're going to be centered around people. And then they're also going to be more likely to be sexual stories. They're more likely to share sexual experiences in their stories. So they're very story-driven and goal-driven. And these are the big markers for extroversion. If you're starting to see these, go down the list and then start interacting with the person and try to see if this is a consistent thing and if it checks all the boxes. Now, if you want to learn more about extroversion, I have a detailed video here, and this is a super duper deep dive in extroversion. You'll really get to know it from the inside out. So next, openness. Openness is one of the most unique ones because it's completely outside the box. And at its core, people that are high in openness are motivated by exploring ideas and feelings and aesthetics for their own sake. So how do you know if you're talking to someone that's high in openness? So in terms of how they look, they're going to be distinctive. They might have a very elegant or a beautiful way that they've presented themselves. They might also be pretty messy. They might have an artistic beauty in mind when it comes to the way they are. If you're in their physical space, you'll notice in a physical space that has beauty in mind or that is physically pleasing. You'll notice in the physical space that might be a little messy. There might be a lot of books and magazines from a variety of different topics because people high in openness have a broad interest of hobbies and a broad number of interests. And they also have a depth of complexity in those interests, and they like to integrate them. And once they integrate these things, they like to talk about it. So when they talk to you, they're going to be very philosophical, or they're going to use more intellectual words. They're going to more likely talk to you about deep things. People that are high in openness, when they go to a party or they're going to a hangout or something like that, they have this urgency to look for other people that are high in openness so they can talk to them about interesting things. And this is a big time need for high openness. There's this need for cognition. There's this need to explore this and then to bring it into the world. In other words, to create something new and then share it with the people around you. They're going to have a high verbal IQ. They're going to explain themselves. They're going to be more expressive in their writing. So if you're online and reading a post and it's like really expressive and well thought out, and it looks at things from multiple perspectives and so on, and all the other posts are like 3 sentences and this one's like 3 paragraphs, chances are this person's higher in openness. They're going to use more intellectual words. What are examples of intellectual words? Well, a lot of the words we're using right now, like beliefs, concepts, knowledge, these are intellectual words. They're also going to use more sensory words like delicious, salty, sour, and so on. So you kind of get the idea and the big difference between extroversion and openness. People in extroversion, they're using words that are more related to people and positive feelings. And they're talking stories. High openness, they talk about concepts and ideas and aesthetics. They're more focused on art, beauty, and philosophy. Very, very different, right? So now let's look at neuroticism. The best way to think about neuroticism is if the first two are more like desire, this is more like fear, right? And neuroticism is important because if you're walking through the jungle at night and you hear, a rambling in the bushes, it should make your hair stand because you're in a dangerous situation. And that's what neuroticism it is. It is a precursor of a dangerous situation. So it increases anxiety, and one of two things is going to be the proper and the best response in that situation. And the first one is just to freeze. Because most animals don't have a great eyesight like we do. If you just stop and freeze, chances are, this tiger or a butterfly, whatever it is, might not see you. The second best is to run away. And the third best is to fight. So with neuroticism, it helps with all 3 of these things. First, through withdrawal, which is one of the main facets. It stops you from moving forward, and it kind of freezes. Procrastination is a good example of this. And then if there's a fight that needs to happen, you have volatility. In other words, someone that's moving is going to get angry very quickly. This is a defensive aggression in order to protect the self. So how can you know if you're talking to someone that's high in neuroticism? So first look for withdrawal traits. Things like, are they shy? Are they blushing? Are they anxious? Do they feel like they're uncomfortable? Do they use, are they holding themselves in a body language that's self-soothing? Are they closed off? Are they in the room or on the side by themselves? Do they look sad or depressed? Someone that's high in neuroticism, as soon as a situation gets dicey and there's a conflict, they might walk away. They might just leave the room. They don't like to address problems because who knows what's going to happen if you unpack that problem fully. It could be dangerous. Next, volatility. Are they moody? Do they get angry? Do they worry a lot? Are they nervous? These are good examples of behavior that is high neuroticism. And you'll notice it when you're out. If all of a sudden this guy, every time you go out with him, he always gets angry. There's some sort of, he might be high neuroticism. In terms of language, the things that they will tell you is, you'll notice that when you propose doing things that they haven't tried before, that might be new and outside of the box, or that is not part of their regular routine, they might be uncertain about it and be like, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to do that. They might be afraid. They might have a lot of self-doubt. So if you're talking to somebody and they are using self-doubt language, they might be higher in neuroticism. So when you meet somebody, how would you know if they're agreeable? What are some of the occupations and hobbies associated with agreeable people? And how can you tell as quickly as possible that someone's agreeable? What's the best way to get along with them? So the good news is that it's very easy to get along with them, and it's somewhat easy to tell if someone is agreeable. So a lot of it you're going to be able to tell because of some of the things that they don't do and some of the things they feel uncomfortable doing. And it's going to become self-evident because to some degree, especially if you're a little bit more on the disagreeable side, it's going to perk up in you the things that they don't bring up, for example. And I can try to give some examples here. So first, let's talk about occupations, and then we'll talk about ways to tell if someone's agreeable or disagreeable. So in terms of occupations, anything in the caregiving space, nurses, etc., teachers, preschool teachers, caregivers, they're going to be higher in agreeableness, maybe substantially higher in agreeableness. Women tend to be higher in agreeableness than men on a normal distribution. Other ways you can tell that if someone's agreeable or disagreeable. If they're disagreeable, they're going to be competitive, and if you say something that they don't agree with, they might respond or say something snarky. They might be critical or skeptical of what you're saying, especially if if they don't agree with it. Someone that is agreeable will just go along with it. So that's kind of like one way you can tell. Another way you can tell is that if someone's really agreeable, you're almost going to have a hard time even pushing their buttons, right? The only much of a button that you could push is situations where you yourself are disturbing or rocking the boat or putting unnecessary attention on them in that sort of way, right? In other words, if you're asking them to do something that goes outside the comfort zone of agreeableness. Another way you can tell if someone's highly agreeable is that they feel more responsible to explain themselves. So for example, if you had a meeting and they didn't show up or they were late or something like that, they're more likely to give you a justification or an explanation as to why that happened. If you ask them to do something and they say no, they're more likely to give you a bunch of reasons why they're saying no. Or someone disagreeable doesn't feel like they owe you an explanation, right? Other ways you can tell if someone is really agreeable is that if you ask them to do you a favor, they would like to do you a favor. They would enjoy doing you a favor. So they will do things for you. And then of course they're going to spend time with you. So Agreeable people like to spend time with other people. That's probably one of their main hobbies. So if you ask someone, what do you do for fun? And they're like, oh, I like to hang out with my friends. That might be a marker of like, okay, this person might be agreeable. Let's find out what he likes to do with his friends. If he's playing competitive, boxing with them, probably not very agreeable. But if he's doing something else with them, especially if it's a cooperative endeavor, then now you have a marker for agreeableness. Another thing that agreeable people don't do is they don't gossip. They don't say things behind people's back. They're less likely to engage within it, and they would feel a little bit more uncomfortable going down that road. So now that we've talked about what it means to be agreeable and how to tell if someone's agreeable, what are some of the best ways to predict whether someone's conscientious or not? So we can start at the very top. When you first meet somebody, how are they dressed? How are they presenting themselves? They're like neat and clean and orderly, and they behave in a very, very formal way. Formality is another facet of conscientiousness. Then those are that means that they're more likely to be conscientious. And when I talk about this, I always think of this in terms of probabilities, right? And when you think that someone has a high probability of being conscientious, what you can do is you can engage in a conversation with them that will test that theory out. So you could find out if they are conscientious. Okay? And so what does that look like? When you meet someone for the first time and you see how they're dressed in a very formal way, maybe they're wearing a tie and a suit, everything is very neat and clean, their briefcase is organized, their office is organized. When you go to their house is organized. Okay? You notice that they run on schedule. The biggest predictor of someone that's highly conscientious is going to be that they're punctual, because by virtue of being punctual, especially when you're punctual consistently, you're showing all the other facets, right? In order to be punctual, you have to be able to plan well, okay, which falls under the organization facet. You have to be able, you have to be industrious, which means you can overcome, you can carry out your plans and you can overcome obstacles, right? Who knows what happened that day? Maybe there was some sort of delay that he overcame. But he showed us that he's capable of overcoming challenges. 3, he's responsible. Like, he's meeting you at the time you guys agreed on. He's not keeping you waiting, which means that he has respect for what you guys agreed on. He's keeping his word. And 4, he's delaying his own gratification, because instead of doing those 3 other things, he could be playing a video game or watching a video or listening to music or doing something fun. The biggest marker for someone that's highly conscientious is that they're always punctual. They're always on time. So what are some other ways you'll know that they're conscientious? So we already talked about their appearance, right? When they talk and when they think, are they more inside the box or outside the box? And the way you can test this is, how do they respond to new ideas? How do they respond to things that are not conventional? If someone is very conscientious, they're going to have a hard time with it. This is going to be brushing up. It's going to be brushing up to one of their limitations, okay? And they're not going to feel comfortable going past and into this new unknown area. So that's another way you can see if someone's conscientious. Another marker for conscientiousness is also obviously like what they do for a living and what their hobbies are, right? Because with any of these big 5, I think one of the most important things to remember is that essentially what they are is they're filters into seeing the world in a certain place. So someone that's conscientious, when they come into an environment, and if something's out of place, it's going to bother them. It's going to literally jump out from the table and scream at them, "Fix me." And they can't do anything about that. That's just the way they're wired. So do you notice that? If something's out of place, does the person automatically put it back where it belongs? That's a marker for someone that's highly conscientious. How comfortable are they with changing their word? So that's another test you could see. You're brushing them up against another limitation. And of course, one of the most important ones is the inhibitory component, right? Are they willing to delay gratification for something better? In other words, invest in the future. Are they willing to sacrifice? Now, this is just scratching the surface. I'm going to do a lot more videos on this. If you like this, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. And then if you want to talk to me personally, you can email me below or you can text message me. And then last but not least, if you want to take the personality test or get access to some of the other content that I'm creating on this, there's a link below. Let me know what you're most interested in and I'll send it to you. So if that's up your wheelhouse, be sure to check that out and I'll see you in the next video.